Hello, dear friends, and welcome back to our channel. We're so glad you could join us today. Sometimes life's most profound lessons don't arrive with a crash of thunder, but with a quiet unfolding of consequences. Today's story is about betrayal, arrogance, and the silent, inevitable price of underestimating the power someone holds within. Grab a seat, get comfortable, and let's explore this tale of hidden strength and deserved reckonings. Sometimes the universe doesn't strike with thunder. It waits patiently while you dig your own grave. And when the fall comes, it's not loud. It's silent, inevitable. He humiliated his pregnant wife in front of his friends, laughing at her unemployment, never realizing that by tomorrow he'd learn the hard way that betrayal and greed always come with a price. The air buzzed with the hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the occasional burst of laughter from the dining area. The scent of expensive cologne, grilled lamb, and aged bourbon filled the space, mixing with the faint trace of Isabella's vanilla perfume as she stood near the bar, her fingers wrapped around a crystal glass of water. She wasn't drinking, of course. 7 months along now, her belly a soft curve beneath her navy wrap dress, she had long since grown used to passing up the expensive wines and liquors that filled their home bar. She had also grown used to nights like this. Julian holding court, his voice just a little too loud, his jokes a little too cruel, his confidence stretching far beyond its limits. He looked every bit the charismatic entrepreneur, a man who knew how to command attention. His colleagues, men who thrived on dominance, power, and luxury, leaned in whenever he spoke, eager to laugh, eager to agree. And let me tell you guys, Julian said, flashing a grin. Marriage, it's a hell of a deal. If you play it right, he added, gesturing vaguely toward Isabella without looking at her. I mean, look at my wife. She's got it easy. No stress, no deadlines, just hanging out at home, relaxing all day. Laughter rippled through the table. Isabella tightened her grip on her glass, her jaw locking for half a second before she forced herself to take a slow breath. She had mastered this reaction by now, this quiet, practiced stillness. She knew exactly how to hide the sting, exactly how to let the words roll past her without letting them stick. One of Julian's colleagues, a broad-shouldered man with slicked-back hair, smirked and took a sip of his drink. So, what does Isabella do these days? He asked, his voice carrying just enough condescension to make it clear he already assumed the answer. Julian leaned back, shaking his head with mock sympathy. Oh, you know, he said, dragging out the words. She's taking it easy these days. Pregnant, you know, it's her full-time job. Another burst of laughter. Someone raised their glass. Must be nice, one of the men chuckled. Wish I could get paid to nap and eat ice cream all day. Isabella swallowed. The water in her glass felt heavier somehow, colder against her palm. She had learned long ago not to react, not to give Julian the satisfaction of seeing whether his words landed. He never said these things in private. Oh no. He saved them for moments like this when he had an audience, when he could make a spectacle out of her. She turned slightly, pretending to adjust the bracelet on her wrist, stealing a glance at Julian from the corner of her eye. His face was relaxed, smug, his hand resting lazily against the arm of the chair. He looked so sure of himself, so certain of his place in the world, so convinced that she was nothing more than an accessory to his success. The irony of it all nearly made her laugh. Her entire world, the home they lived in, the luxuries he flaunted, the very job that paid for the bourbon in his glass, was built on her empire, her intelligence, her power. And yet in this moment, in this room full of men who thrived on ego, he had reduced her to nothing. A woman with no job, no ambition, no worth beyond the child she carried. Julian turned toward her suddenly, a lazy grin pulling at his lips. Hey babe, he called, waving her over as if she were a waitress. Why don't you come say something? You've been awfully quiet over there. Isabella lifted her chin, her smile small and unreadable. Just listening, she said smoothly. Didn't want to interrupt all the wisdom. The sarcasm barely registered with him. He just smirked and turned back to his friends. See? She knows how lucky she is. Someone nudged his shoulder. Seriously, man, you've got it all. Gorgeous wife, a baby on the way, big promotion coming up. Isabella didn't miss the way Julian's chest puffed just slightly at that last part. Yeah, he said, swirling the bourbon in his glass. It's a lot to handle. The bills, the mortgage, the baby. It's all on me. The friend must have said something back because Julian laughed again, lower this time. I mean, I can't carry Isabella forever. After the baby, she's going to have to get off her ass and do something. Isabella's breath caught in her throat. Julian kept talking, oblivious to the fact that his entire world was shifting. In that moment, she knew these men. She knew their type. They had no idea the woman standing in the room with them had built something greater than any of them ever could. She wasn't just a wife, wasn't just pregnant, wasn't just someone living off her husband's generosity. She was their boss. And tomorrow they would all find out exactly what that meant. Short interlude. Before we dive deeper into this unfolding drama, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you believe that karma always finds its way, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories of justice served. Now back to Isabella and Julian. Story continues. Isabella sat in the dim glow of the nursery, her hands resting on the curve of her belly. Julian was still in the dining room, laughing with his friends, probably pouring himself another drink, basking in the attention he thought he had earned. She let out a slow breath, tracing small circles over her belly, grounding herself in the moment. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about something bigger, something she had seen coming for a long time. She thought back to the day she met Julian, how simple everything had seemed back then. She had just finished a late meeting at Apex Global, slipping out of the boardroom with the kind of exhaustion that came from making multi-million-dollar decisions while pretending they didn't weigh on her. She had needed coffee, something strong, something to push her through the next round of negotiations. And that was when she saw him. Julian had been standing outside the cafe near her office, talking animatedly on the phone, grinning like he had just won the lottery. He was younger than, a little rough around the edges, but full of energy, full of ambition. She had stepped inside, ordered her coffee, and before she even turned around, he was there, flashing that easy, confident smile. "Rough day?" he asked, nodding toward the way she had been rubbing her temples. "You could say that." He had leaned in a little, lowering his voice like he was letting her in on a secret. "Let me guess. Terrible boss. Too many deadlines. I hear freelancing is the way to go." The words had hit her harder than they should have. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the way he had said it, so casually, so sure of himself. But she made a split-second decision. She didn't correct him. She didn't tell him that she wasn't answering to some terrible boss, that she was the boss. Instead, she had nodded, giving him a small, tired smile. Yeah, something like that. She wanted to know what it was like to have a conversation with a man who wasn't trying to impress her, who wasn't calculating her worth based on her net worth. Julian had been charming, easy to talk to. He had dreams, big ones, the kind that made his eyes light up when he talked about them. He wanted to climb the corporate ladder, wanted to prove himself. And Isabella had found herself drawn to that energy, to the way he made the world sound simple, like success was just a matter of pushing hard enough. For the first time in years, she let herself step out of the role of CEO and just be Isabella. Not the woman who made board members nervous. Not the woman whose decisions shaped entire industries. Just Isabella. A woman figuring things out. A woman with no power, no pressure, no walls to keep people at a distance. And it had felt good. She had let it happen. Let the lie stretch out longer than it should have. One day turned into 2, then 3. Before she knew it, they were staying up late talking about everything and nothing. He made her laugh, made her feel like she wasn't carrying the weight of an empire on her shoulders. And when he talked about his dreams, she had admired that fire in him. But looking back now, she realized that fire had never been about building something. It had always been about having something, about owning something or someone. Their relationship moved fast. Within a year, they were married. And for a while, Isabella let herself believe she had found someone who understood her, who saw her as an equal. But then little things started to shift. The way he spoke about work, how he brushed off his colleagues' contributions and made it sound like every success belonged to him. "My team," he'd say with a laugh, shaking his head. "Please. If I wasn't there, they'd be running in circles." Isabella had smiled the first few times, not thinking much of it. Confidence was attractive after all. But soon she realized Julian didn't just want to succeed, he wanted to be the reason things succeeded. He didn't just want to climb the ladder, he wanted to be the only one on it. Then there was the way he talked about other people, especially the ones he thought were beneath him. Waiters, assistants, junior employees. He treated them like they were props in the background of his story, like their struggles were amusing at best, inconvenient at worst. She would sit across from him at dinner, listening as he talked about his latest brilliant move at work, how he had saved a project that was doomed until he stepped in. She had known, of course, known that his big ideas weren't his own, that the credit he was taking belonged to other people. She had seen the reports, the emails, the late-night memos from his team members doing the real work. And yet, Julian sat there sipping expensive wine she had paid for, acting like the world should be grateful for his genius. "You wouldn't understand," he had said one night when she asked him about a deal that fell through. "It's just business. There's a lot of pressure at my level." Isabella had stared at him across the candlelit table, pressing her lips together to keep from laughing. His level. If only he knew. He was good at playing the part, though. He had mastered the language of corporate ambition, the firm handshake, the confident stride, the way he could make people believe he was smarter than he actually was. And maybe that was why she stayed as long as she did. Because part of her wanted to believe that Julian was still the man she met that night at the cafe. But then one day she realized something else had changed. He had stopped asking about her. In the beginning, he used to ask her questions, what she wanted, what she dreamed about. But now he just assumed. Assumed she was content. Assumed she had no ambitions. Assumed that she was lucky to have him. One evening, she had been sitting on the couch, half listening as he went on about some executive meeting, when he looked over at her and said, almost absent-mindedly, "It must be nice, you know, not having to worry about a career anymore." She had blinked, turning to him. "What?" Julian had given her a small, indulgent smile, like he was talking to a child. "I mean, you don't have to stress about all this. You get to relax, focus on the baby. You don't have to prove yourself like the rest of us." Isabella had stared at him, something tightening in her chest. Not have to prove herself? She had built an empire. And here was Julian, her husband, acting like she was some kept woman living off his so-called success. That was the moment something inside her snapped. She had let this go on for too long. She had watched him build a career on stolen credit, watched him climb a ladder he didn't even realize she had built. She had stayed silent, let him believe in his own self-importance, let him gloat about being the provider while he spent her money, lived in her home, worked at her company. He had spent years making her feel small, making her seem invisible. But no more. The next morning, she made a call, a quiet, deliberate request to her private investigator. "I need you to dig deeper," she said, her voice calm, steady. "I don't care what it costs. I want every detail, every secret, every lie." Inside her private office on the top floor of Apex Global, Isabella sat at the long, sleek conference table, her fingers lightly drumming against the smooth surface. Her team was already in place. Victoria, her head of legal, was going through the final stack of documents, her sharp eyes scanning every line for any possible loophole. Across from her, David, head of security, leaned back slightly in his chair, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. On Isabella's right sat Chloe, her most trusted assistant, scrolling through emails on her tablet, her brow furrowed in concentration. The air in the room was thick, humming with the weight of what they were about to do. Isabella exhaled slowly and looked at Victoria. "Tell me we have everything." Victoria didn't look up as she flipped another page, nodding. "We have everything. The offshore accounts, the falsified expenses, the unauthorized transactions. It's airtight. He won't have a legal leg to stand on." The first report had come back with something small, an offshore account, a hidden stash of money. Julian had been quietly building it, transferring funds little by little. At first, it seemed like nothing, a little extra on the side. But the more they dug, the clearer the picture became. It wasn't just his money. It was her money. Money siphoned from corporate accounts, disguised as expenses, hidden beneath layers of paperwork that most people wouldn't have looked twice at. But Isabella wasn't most people. She knew the inner workings of her company better than anyone. Julian had been stealing from Apex Global. And it didn't stop there. There were emails, conversations with competitors, small leaks of information disguised as casual remarks. "I hear Sterling Corp is struggling with their next phase. Maybe a strategic buyout could be in play." Nothing blatant, nothing that could directly tie him to sabotage, but enough to confirm what Isabella had started to suspect. Julian had never been loyal, not to his company, not to his colleagues, not to her. Isabella swallowed back the satisfaction threatening to rise in her chest. And his termination? Chloe pulled up the document on her tablet, turning the screen toward Isabella. Finalized, effective immediately. Fraud, breach of contract, and corporate espionage. Everything's been reviewed by HR. We've prepared the official notice to be sent out to the board once he's escorted from the premises. David cleared his throat, leaning forward. "Speaking of which, my team is ready. Security will be stationed outside the executive conference room at 9 a.m. sharp. As soon as you give the signal, we'll make sure he doesn't cause a scene." Isabella allowed herself a small nod. "He'll try to though. You all know that, right?" She glanced between them. "He won't go quietly." Victoria smirked. "He can throw as big of a tantrum as he wants. It won't change a damn thing." Chloe let out a quiet breath. "I still can't believe he was dumb enough to think he could get away with all of this." Isabella tilted her head slightly. "It's not just about getting away with it. He actually thought he deserved it. That's the part that gets me." She tapped a finger against the table, her voice quieter now. "He spent the last 3 years rewriting reality in his favor. In his mind, he's the hero of his own story, the provider, the self-made man, the one taking care of the fragile, dependent wife who needs him. She let out a small, humorless laugh. And tomorrow, he's going to wake up thinking it's just another day. Chloe scoffed. He's going to lose his mind when he realizes what's happening. Victoria shut the file in front of her with a sharp snap. And I can't wait to watch it. There was a brief silence before David spoke again. You sure you want to do this yourself, Isabella? She looked at him. Absolutely. You don't have to, he continued, his tone careful. We can handle it. Deliver the papers, escort him out. Let him figure out the rest on his own. Isabella shook her head. No. He needs to see it. He needs to hear it from me. After everything he said, everything he's done, I want to be the one to take that last piece of power away from him. David gave a slow nod of approval. Then we'll be ready. Chloe glanced at the time on her tablet. It's almost 1 a.m. Do you want us to stay and go over anything else? Isabella took a deep breath and stood, rolling her shoulders slightly. No, we've covered everything. She glanced at Victoria. File the final report and have the board on standby for an emergency meeting right after. We'll need their signatures to finalize the official separation. Victoria nodded. Consider it done. Isabella turned to David. Brief security again in the morning. Make sure every floor is covered. I don't want him trying to sneak into his office or destroy anything on his way out. Already on it. Chloe hesitated, then leaned forward slightly. Isabella? She paused, choosing her words carefully. Are you okay? Isabella stilled for a moment, then let out a quiet exhale, offering Chloe a small smile. I will be. The room fell silent again, but it wasn't tense. It was steady, resolved. They all knew what tomorrow meant. One last time, Isabella glanced at the termination papers on the screen. She reached for her phone, scrolling to the last text message she had sent Julian earlier that evening. Don't wait up for me. Big day tomorrow. A fitting last warning. Julian stepped into the sleek, glass-walled boardroom with the confidence of a man who believed he was untouchable. He adjusted the cuffs of his expensive suit, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. His reflection flashed in the long, polished table as he strode in, flashing a grin at the room full of executives ready to hear the news he had been waiting for. Today was his day. He had been expecting this meeting for weeks. Subtle nods, casual mentions, the way his superiors had started treating him with just a little more deference. He had worked for this. He had played the game, shaken the right hands, taken credit where it was needed, stepped on whoever he had to in order to get here. And now he was about to be promoted to senior vice president. The thought sent a rush of satisfaction through him as he ran a hand over his tie, straightening it as he stepped forward. Then he saw her. Isabella. She was standing at the head of the table, calm, composed, dressed in an elegant but severe black suit. She looked like she belonged there, like she had always belonged there. His smirk faltered for just a second before he caught himself. Isabella, he said, chuckling as he took a few steps closer, glancing around the room. What are you doing here? No one laughed. No one smiled. Something was off. The energy in the room wasn't what he had expected. The usual relaxed arrogance of his colleagues had been replaced with something colder, something unreadable. The air was heavy, thick with something he couldn't quite place. Isabella didn't move. She didn't smile. She didn't soften the way she usually did when he walked into a room. Instead, she looked him straight in the eye and said, Julian, you've been stealing from this company. Silence. Julian blinked, his mind scrambling to make sense of the words. He let out a small laugh, shaking his head. What? As of this moment, Isabella continued, her voice steady, you're fired. The words hit him like a slap. Silence. The only sound was the faint hum of the city beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the distant noise of an office that was still moving while his world came to a halt. Then she moved, sliding a thick folder across the table toward him. It landed with a soft but heavy thud. And for the first time in his life, Julian felt something sharp and unfamiliar twist in his chest. Fear. He stared down at the folder, his hands frozen at his sides. Isabella tilted her head slightly. Go ahead, she said, her voice smooth, almost amused. Open it. Julian hesitated. He didn't want to, didn't need to. He already knew. Somehow, some way, she knew. But he couldn't just stand there. Slowly, stiffly, he reached for the folder, flipping it open with fingers that had gone cold. His eyes scanned the first page. Expense reports, transfers, bank accounts he had thought were untraceable. Emails, conversations he had long since forgotten about, laid out in crisp, damning clarity. And then the message, I think I've hit the jackpot with this one. If I play my cards right, I'll never have to work again. His stomach turned to stone. He looked up sharply. Isabella was watching him, eyes unwavering, unreadable. How? He started, his voice cracking before stopping himself. He knew how. She had played him. For 3 years, she had let him believe he was the one in control, let him live inside his own delusion while she gathered everything she needed to burn his world to the ground. His breath came out in a short, sharp exhale. Isabella, he tried again, pasting on a strained smile. This is ridiculous. Whatever this is, whatever you think you have, I can explain. I don't need you to explain, she said simply. The evidence speaks for itself. He turned to the board, looking for some kind of lifeline, some kind of support. Gentlemen, he started, his voice regaining some of its usual confidence. The decision is final, Julian. It was Robert, the CFO, a man who had always greeted Julian with firm handshakes and polite nods. But today, his expression was cold, detached. The board has reviewed the evidence, Robert continued. There is no appeal. Julian's pulse pounded in his ears. He turned back to Isabella, his expression darkening. You can't do this, he said, his voice lower now, more dangerous. Isabella smiled then, just barely. I already did. The door behind him opened. 2 security guards stepped inside, their presence a quiet but undeniable force. One of them, a tall man with a firm stance, nodded toward Julian. Mr. Vance, the guard said, voice professional, almost too polite. Please come with us. Julian didn't move. He was still processing, still fighting against the reality of what was happening. He clenched his jaw. Isabella, you don't want to do this. She exhaled softly, almost as if she were bored. I really do. One of the guards stepped closer. Sir. Julian flinched at the word. Sir. A title that used to carry weight, authority, power. Now it was just a formality, a hollow sound with nothing behind it. His fingers curled into fists. His pride screamed at him to fight, to argue, to demand an explanation. But there was nothing to argue against. The evidence was all there, spread out before him. Undeniable. Isabella watched him for another moment, tilting her head. You should go now, she said softly. Before this gets any more embarrassing for you. The final nail. Julian swallowed. For the first time in his life, he had nothing to say. Slowly, stiffly, he straightened his tie, squared his shoulders, and turned toward the door. As he stepped past her, Isabella spoke one last time. Oh, and Julian? He paused. She smiled. Don't forget to turn in your key card. A muscle ticked in his jaw, but he didn't turn around. Because it was over. And she had one. Julian sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. His mind was spinning, his heartbeat a rapid, erratic thud against his ribs. He had spent the last hour making calls, one after another, each one ending the same way. I'm sorry, Julian. There's nothing I can do. I have to distance myself from this. This isn't a good time. Excuses. Rejections. People who had once laughed at his jokes, clapped him on the back, toasted to his success, now they wanted nothing to do with him. He took a shaky breath, scrolling through his contacts, eyes darting over names that just yesterday would have answered his calls without hesitation. Now, most of them sent him straight to voicemail. Cowards. He tried again. This time, Robert, one of the board members. The same man who had sat across from him at countless dinners. The same man who once said, Julian, you've got a bright future here. The phone rang once, twice, then a click. Robert, listen. This is all a misunderstanding. Isabella. A sigh. Julian, don't. Julian clenched his jaw. You know me. You know this isn't how I operate. This whole thing, it's her. She's trying to humiliate me. You and I both know how these things go. A woman gets emotional, she blows things out of proportion. A sharp inhale. Silence. Then Robert spoke, his voice clipped. Let me stop you right there. This isn't Isabella blowing things out of proportion. This is you getting caught. And if you think throwing around misogynistic excuses is going to fix it, then you're dumber than I thought. Julian's stomach twisted. Robert, I can't be associated with you, Robert said coldly. And if you call me again, I'll have my lawyer issue a statement saying I was unaware of your actions. Do you understand? Julian opened his mouth, but the line went dead. His hand trembled as he dropped the phone onto the passenger seat. His jaw tightened, his vision blurred at the edges. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. He sucked in a breath and reached for his laptop, balancing it on his lap as he logged into his private banking account. The numbers would be there. They had to be there. Loading. The screen flickered. Access denied. Julian blinked. Refreshed the page. Account frozen. Contact bank representative. His pulse spiked. He opened another account, the offshore one. The one no one was supposed to know about. Locked. His breath came short now, ragged. This wasn't just Isabella getting even. This was systematic. She had planned every step. She had anticipated his next move before he even made it. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, but his mind was already screaming at him. He needed another way out. His jaw clenched. If Isabella wanted to play dirty, then so would he. He pulled out his phone again, scrolling through encrypted contacts until he found a familiar name, a competitor. A company that had been circling Apex Global for years, desperate for inside information, desperate for leverage. His hands were still shaking when he hit dial. The phone rang twice before a voice answered, smooth and calculated. Didn't expect to hear from you, Vance. Julian forced a smile he didn't feel. Let's just say I have some information that might be valuable to you. A pause, then a low chuckle. Ah, so Isabella isn't as clean as she seems. I have files, Julian said, gripping the phone tighter. Emails, client lists. You help me, and I help you. There was silence on the other end. Julian's heart pounded. Then click. The line went dead. He pulled the phone away, staring at it in disbelief. He redialed, but the call wouldn't go through. His number had been blocked. Julian's mouth went dry. He barely had time to process it before another buzz. This time, a text from Isabella's legal team. Nice try, Julian. Let's not make this worse for you. His stomach twisted into knots. They knew. They already knew. He ran a hand down his face, breathing hard. There was only one move left. The media. Journalists loved stories like this. A corrupt CEO, a scandal. If he could spin the narrative before Isabella did, he could salvage something. Maybe not his job, maybe not his reputation in the corporate world, but at least he could make her look just as bad. He scrolled through his contacts again, finding the number of a reporter who had covered corporate scandals before, the kind who didn't care about facts as long as the headline got clicks. The phone rang. Hey man, Julian said the moment the reporter picked up. I have a story for you. The real story. The reporter didn't respond right away. There was a long, uncomfortable pause before he finally spoke. You mean the same story Isabella Thorne's team just handed over? Julian froze. Yeah. The reporter continued, almost amused. She beat you to it, buddy. Gave us everything. Every document, every file, every little detail. It's airtight. Legally, ethically, you're done. There's no counterstory here. Julian's fingers tightened around the phone. Look, the reporter interrupted. I'd be careful if I were you. Because from what I've seen, the only person whose reputation is about to burn here is yours. And it's going to burn fast. Julian's entire body went cold. Another beep. Another notification. He looked down at his screen, his breath hitching as he saw the first headline pop up. Julian Vance terminated from Apex Global amid fraud allegations. Another one followed. Inside the fall of a corporate executive. How greed led to downfall. His stomach lurched. The news had already broken. Isabella hadn't just ruined him. She had erased him before he even had the chance to fight back. His phone slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the floor of the car. Julian stared ahead, chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. Everything was gone. And the worst part? It had never even been a fight. Isabella had ended him before he ever had a chance to swing back. She sat in her office, the city stretched out before her. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, the email open in front of her, the words sharp and damning. If she's rich, I win. If not, I'll make sure she stays dependent on me. The date in the corner of the screen burned into her mind. Months before their wedding. Her breath came out slowly, carefully measured, but her hands were shaking. It was strange, really. She had already known what kind of man he was. Had already seen the truth laid out in bank statements, fraudulent transactions, whispered meetings behind closed doors. She had already accepted that Julian was selfish, that he was a liar, a thief, a parasite clinging to power he had never actually earned. But this was different. The way he had looked at her, spoken to her, touched her. The way he had held her hand across the dinner table, leaned in to whisper in her ear at parties, kissed her forehead in the morning before heading off to work. Every, I love you. Every, I've got you, babe. A calculated lie. She closed her eyes, but the memories kept coming. Julian kneeling in front of her the night he proposed, sliding the ring onto her finger, looking up at her like she was his whole world. Julian pulling her into his arms after their wedding dance, murmuring, "We make a hell of a team, don't we?" Julian, resting his hand on her stomach when she first told him about the baby, grinning as he said, "You don't have to worry about a thing. I've got us." She had believed him. For years, she had told herself there was something good buried beneath his arrogance. She had explained away the little things, justified the moments of condescension, excused the dismissive words, convinced herself that his love was real. But no, he had never loved her. Not really. He had chosen her the way a businessman chooses an investment, calculating the risks, weighing the benefits, deciding that whether she was rich or not, she would be useful to him. Her throat felt tight. She glanced back at the screen, rereading the words, making sure she wasn't imagining them. If she's rich, I win. If not, I'll make sure she stays dependent on me. Her hand curled into a fist, nails digging into her palm. She had never been dependent on him. Not for a single second. But he had wanted her to be. He had wanted her small, weak, trapped in a life where he was the provider, where he had the power, where she needed him. He had planned for that. And when it didn't happen, when she continued to be her own person, when she didn't shrink the way he had expected her to, he resented her for it, mocked her, dismissed her, laughed about it with his friends. A small, bitter sound escaped her lips, something between a laugh and a sob. The love she had for him, the last fraying thread of it, snapped. She let go of all of it. The memories, the doubts, the part of her that had wondered, in some distant corner of her mind, if maybe there was something worth saving. There wasn't. There never had been. She reached for the mouse, finger steady now, and clicked delete. The email vanished from the screen, disappearing into nothing, just like Julian would. Julian sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper, his phone clutched tightly in his hand. The dim yellow light buzzed above him, flickering every few seconds, casting shadows that made the room feel even smaller than it already was. The TV was on, volume low, but he could still hear the words. Former Apex Global executive Julian Vance faces formal charges of corporate fraud after an internal investigation revealed. He closed his eyes, willing the words away, but they kept playing, every news channel, every business site. His name dragged through the mud. His career burned to the ground in real time. A week ago he had been untouchable, a rising star, the kind of man people wanted to be around. And now he was a joke. He exhaled sharply, opening his phone again, scrolling through his contacts. He needed someone, anyone, to pick up. He tried Robert, straight to voicemail. Tried Mark, blocked. He clenched his jaw, scrolling further. These were his friends, his colleagues. The same people who once drank with him, toasted to his future, told him he was destined for more. Where were they now? He tried another. Finally, someone answered. Hello. The voice was cautious, like they'd answered by accident. Julian forced a chuckle, gripping the phone tighter. Hey man, it's me. A pause. Yeah, I know. The hesitation in their voice sent a fresh wave of anger through him. Listen, Julian continued, trying to keep his tone light. You know how the media is. They blow everything out of proportion. I just need a place to land for a bit. Figure things out. Maybe you've got something at your firm. Julian. The voice on the other end trailed off, and he already knew what was coming. Look, I can't. No one wants to be associated with this. It's too messy. I've known you for years, Julian said, his voice dropping, desperation slipping through despite himself. You're really going to turn your back on me? I have to think about my own reputation. And that was it. Julian pulled the phone away from his ear, staring at the screen as the call disconnected. They were all gone. He tossed the phone onto the bed, running both hands through his hair, breathing hard. He had one last option, one last person. His mother. His hands felt numb as he dialed, chest tightening as it rang once, twice. Then she answered. Julian. He almost sagged in relief. Mom, thank God. I need to talk to you. A beat of silence. I saw the news, she said. Julian swallowed. It's not what it looks like, okay? Isabella, she set me up. She turned everyone against me, froze my accounts, made me look like some kind of criminal. Did she make you steal from your company? Her voice was sharp, no warmth in it. His stomach clenched. Mom, you don't understand, eh? I understand perfectly. Julian gripped the phone tighter. I just need a place to stay for a bit, just until I figure things out. No. The word hit harder than he expected. He let out a weak laugh. No? You made your choices, she said, her voice cold. You put yourself in this mess and you can get yourself out. His throat tightened. Mom, come on now. I'm done cleaning up after you, she said. Don't call again. Click. The line went dead. Julian let the phone slip from his fingers, staring at the stained carpet beneath his feet. This was it. He had lost his job, his money, his friends, his reputation. And now even his own mother had turned her back on him. A muffled laugh escaped his throat, bitter and humorless. Just days ago, he had mocked Isabella for being jobless, dependent, a woman with nothing. And now he was the one with nothing. Isabella stood by the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of her office, watching the city below. The same city that had once felt too small, too stifling, like it belonged only to men like Julian. But not anymore. Now it belonged to her. The door behind her opened and Chloe stepped in, holding a fresh copy of Forbes in her hands. She didn't say anything, just walked up to Isabella's desk and placed the magazine down with a small, satisfied smile. Isabella turned, her eyes falling on the glossy cover. There she was, sitting in the very chair she was now standing beside, poised and confident, a knowing smile on her lips. The headline stretched across the page in bold, unmissable letters, Isabella Thorne, the woman who built an empire in silence. She ran her fingers over the smooth cover, a quiet hum of pride settling in her chest. They wanted to go with something dramatic for the title, Chloe said, amusement in her voice. The phantom CEO who outsmarted the corporate world. But I told them this was better. More you. Isabella chuckled softly, flipping the pages until she found the article. The first few lines made her pause. For years, Isabella Thorne watched, listened, and waited while the world believed she was simply the wife of an ambitious executive. In reality, she was the force behind one of the most successful corporate expansions of the decade. Now, for the first time, she steps forward, not just as the woman who took down corruption, but as the leader who is reshaping the industry itself. She let out a slow breath. This moment, this was what she had been working toward. Not revenge, not Julian's destruction, but this, the rebuilding, the transformation. HR finalized the new policy updates, Chloe continued, sitting across from her. The extended maternity leave, the increased support for working mothers, everything's rolling out next quarter. Isabella nodded, flipping another page. And the mentorship program? Already oversubscribed. Women across every department signed up the moment the announcement went live. Chloe smiled. Some of them, they actually cried. Said it's the first time they felt like someone at the top actually sees them. Isabella's chest tightened, but it wasn't with sadness. It was with purpose. This was what mattered. Not just proving Julian wrong, not just exposing the men who had underestimated her, but making sure no other woman ever had to sit in a room full of men and feel small. She had spent years pretending to be powerless. Now she would use that time, those scars, to ensure no woman under her leadership ever had to do the same. Chloe tapped the magazine. They want a follow-up interview. Something personal. They're calling you the most elusive CEO in modern business. People want to know who you are. Isabella tilted her head, considering. For years, she had stayed in the shadows, orchestrating everything from behind closed doors. It had given her an advantage. But now she wasn't hiding anymore. Set it up, she said, closing the magazine. Chloe grinned. Already did. Isabella let out a small laugh, shaking her head. She turned back toward the window, watching the city move below. Apex Global was thriving. The toxic leadership was gone. The company was stronger, smarter, better. And as for Julian, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above his head as he stood behind the counter of the electronics store, scanning yet another item with the lifeless beep of the register. A pair of earbuds, a phone case, a pack of AA batteries, the kind of things he never used to think twice about. That'll be $42.99, Julian muttered, not bothering to look up. The customer swiped their card, barely acknowledging him. Julian handed them their receipt with a hollow smile before they walked away. This was his life now. The store wasn't big, just another chain electronics retailer with shelves stocked high with gadgets he used to replace without thinking. Now he spent his days under cold artificial lights wearing a cheap name tag that read Julian, Associate, taking orders from a 23-year-old manager who barely had any real work experience. It wasn't supposed to be like this. A year ago, he'd walked through glass-walled offices, shaking hands with powerful men, drinking whiskey in penthouse suites, making deals over steak dinners. A year ago, he had been someone. Now he had to ask teenagers if they wanted to add a 2-year protection plan to their purchases. His jaw tightened as he glanced at the line forming at the register. Another customer stepped forward, setting down a few items and a magazine. Julian's stomach clenched. Isabella's face stared up at him from the glossy cover. Women who built empires. He swallowed hard. His fingers were stiff as he picked up the magazine, scanning the barcode without meeting the customer's eyes. "Hey," the guy in front of him said suddenly, tilting his head. "You look familiar." Julian's grip on the magazine tightened. "Weren't you that big-time executive?" The guy squinted, snapping his fingers like he was trying to pull the memory out of thin air. "Yeah. Julian Vance, right? You worked at, what was it?" Julian forced a thin smile. "I used to." The customer nodded slowly, his eyes flicking down to the magazine in Julian's hands before letting out a small chuckle. "Damn. That's gotta suck." Julian said nothing, just handed him his receipt. The guy took his bag and walked off, still shaking his head. Julian set the magazine down beside the register, unable to stop himself from looking at the cover again. Isabella, looking calm, powerful, successful. He could still hear her voice in his head. "You should go now before this gets any more embarrassing for you." He had thought he would find a way back. Thought he'd recover. But now, a year later, he knew the truth. There was no coming back from this. Isabella hadn't just ruined him. She had erased him. And worst of all, she probably hadn't thought about him since. The nursery was warm, the soft glow of the lamp casting golden light across the room as Isabella rocked gently in the chair, cradling her newborn daughter in her arms. The baby's tiny fingers curled and uncurled against Isabella's chest, her breath soft and steady. Isabella ran her fingers along her daughter's delicate cheek, smiling as she watched her sleep. "We're going to be just fine," she whispered, pressing a kiss to the baby's forehead. Then, with a quiet strength, she smiled. "No. We're going to thrive." And for the first time in a long, long time, Isabella didn't think about Julian at all. Dear friend, you know, as I sat with this story, it really hit me how life can flip so fast. One minute you're on top of the world, the next you're standing under fluorescent lights wondering how everything slipped away. And the truth is, we don't always see it coming. But here's the thing the Stoics always reminded us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Real strength is how you respond. Julian lost everything because he thought power meant control over others, control over perception. Isabella won because she understood real power starts within. She didn't scream. She didn't fight dirty in the moment. She built in silence, in focus, in purpose. And in the end, she didn't just survive, she thrived. That's what I hope you carry from this. No matter who tries to silence you, underestimate you, or tear you down, you still get to choose who you become after. Because healing loud isn't always strength. Sometimes power is quiet. If the story spoke to you even a little, it would mean the world if you gave it a like, shared it with someone who needs to hear it, and hit subscribe so we can keep growing together. Thanks for being here with us. Your time, your attention, it truly matters. Until next time.